Afghanistan.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. Senator Johnson.
Thanks, Senator Cardin. I also want to thank the witnesses, Ambassador Crocker. Thanks for your service. Read an interesting book well over 10 years ago. It was written by members of our special ops that served in Afghanistan, and their basic conclusion was that we pretty well accomplished what we needed to accomplish before General Franks ever, stepped foot on the ground there. In hindsight, it's kind of hard to really argue with their conclusion, except for one point. Osama bin Laden had escaped from Tora Bora, and I think there's just a political imperative to do everything we could to track him down and bring him to justice. Ambassador Crocker, I have two questions for you. One, looking back, this is obviously a retrospect. It's important for us to examine what mistakes were made. But I think even more importantly, one looking forward having to do with Pakistan. So first, the backward-looking question, to what extent was Pakistan complicit in harboring Osama bin Laden? And then looking forward, obviously, Pakistan's a nuclear power. In your testimony, you mentioned that they're going to be under pressure from the Taliban. It's almost unthinkable to contemplate the Taliban getting a hold of the Pakistan government and those nuclear weapons. What do we need to do to prevent that? But first, what do you know about the complicity of Pakistan harboring Osama bin Laden?
Senator, it's a great question to which I don't have the answer. There's obviously been a lot of speculation over that, both before and after the Abbottabad raid that killed him. Pakistan was a reasonably good partner in the fight against al-Qaeda leaders inside of Pakistan, including several ops chiefs, number threes, in the al-Qaeda organization, and enough pressure that while we did not find Osama bin Laden in those years prior to his killing, he was not communicating. So I really can't say that they were complicit in harboring him, that they knew all about him and where he was. I just don't know. Going forward, I think it is critically important that we do some listening as Afghanistan's neighbors gauge their own risk and threat. As you say, it is an appalling thought that the Pakistani government could be so destabilized that they would lose control over their nuclear weapons. And that is the point I made earlier. We have got to act like a global leader because, trust me, this is now an absolute global problem. The enormous boost that the fact and the nature of our withdrawal has emboldened Islamic extremists everywhere. We're going to be dealing with that for a long time, and we're going to have to deal with it collectively.
Well, the reason I asked the questions in combination, if we truly don't know Pakistan's, whether they were complicit or not in harboring Osama bin Laden, based on the imperative moving forward, I think we have to give them the benefit of the doubt, and we need to do everything we can now to assist Pakistan from being overrun by the Taliban. Would you agree with that?
I would. And we've got to be careful. We've got to be measured, and we've got to be suspicious. But I would judge the potential threat to Pakistan's own stability to be so severe that we're going to have to figure out, again, I would hope collectively, how that threat can be reduced.
Ms. Miller, I think many of us on this committee, I know Senator Shaheen has been active in this issue, supporting the women in Afghanistan. I think we mourn their upcoming, probably present loss of freedoms that we helped establish for them. It's kind of hard to just turn away from that. It's hard not to acknowledge the fact that America, with all the mistakes made, all the bad decisions on a bipartisan basis made, our intentions were good. I know in your testimony you covered this, but can you just reinforce again, what can we do? Or is there nothing we can do to try and reinforce the gains that the Afghan women made during our time there?
Yeah, I mean, there are understandable reasons why it might be the impulse in American policy now to isolate the Taliban regime, to punish the regime, to make good on what the United States long said to the Taliban, which is that if you take power through military means rather than a negotiated settlement, you will be a pariah regime starved of resources. On the other hand, I do think we have to consider, what do you get out of a policy like that? What do the Afghan people, what do Afghan women get out of an isolation policy? What does the United States get out of an isolation policy vis-a-vis the Taliban? And my conclusion, and it's a difficult conclusion to make, and I've personally struggled with it, is you don't get anything at all. If there's any prospect of even slightly moderating Taliban policies, if there's any even slight prospect of having some perhaps secret cooperation with the Taliban on counterterrorism, it's not going to be by isolating them. It can only be through some engagement and through some relaxation of U.S. willingness to provide development aid that isn't directly to the Taliban government, but that could have the effect of helping them to reinforce their grip on power. We have to recognize that. The Taliban are resilient. They resisted enormous military pressure by the United States over 20 years. They are perfectly capable of resisting some financial pressure and efforts to use aid as leverage. And so I come to the difficult conclusion that some degree of engagement with the Taliban, avoiding particular individuals in particular ministries, and some degree of aid to be able to continue programs, for instance, to support women and girls in Afghanistan, is what is in the greatest interest of the United States as well as the Afghan people.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller. If I just made, just quickly, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a comment because I think in both cases, the answers to my questions indicate that as many as mistakes were made in the past, we have to look at the reality on the ground now, and we need to do everything we can to move positively forward. And that may be some pretty hard pills to swallow, but it's extremely important for us to look at the reality situation now and how can we make that reality better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.